Swin, I want to thank you for joining me here on this episode of Spolitics. I'm going to start this episode by asking a question I ask every guest that appears on Spolitics, and that is name an athlete or a moment that made you love sports.
Oh, oh man. And I should have been prepared for this one. I would say a moment probably would have been the '96 Olympic team. I think for the women, I think that probably was a big one, and I think just because it was here in the U.S. and I think an athlete. I would have to give it up for, and this is just gonna sound a little crazy, but probably not too crazy. But I used to watch a lot of the guys, and I probably was the era that when the WNBA hit, that kind of transitioned to like women. So when they pulled up on that playground and said like we got next, when I tell you life was like because for young hoopers, especially female hoopers, we've done that so many times, and it just like pierced through me, and I was like, yes, yes, this is me, this is us, this is now, and I just think about that. So I have to give a lot of credit. I mean, Lisa and Swoops, Rebecca, like everyone that really helped start and the foundation of WNBA, that meant something.
Yeah, that was an amazing campaign. And, that 96 team, that kicked off a lot of stuff. It was obviously what kind of led to the WNBA happening because they knew based off that yes, basketball, women, given what the attendance was, what the ratings were for those 96 games and watching those women, they knew for sure that the product would work. The thing that is among the many remarkable achievements across your career, and you sit in a very special group of people who have literally won at every level, from high school to Olympics to the WNBA to college. You won at every single level. You won a title. But what is interesting about your background is hearing that you you chose basketball out of, it sounded like, yes, you were good at it, but it sounded like you chose it out of kind of necessity, as in you come from a big family, money wasn't raining on trees like that, and you chose basketball because you felt like that was the thing you could best get a scholarship in. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, that's very accurate. I think for a lot of kind of kids in my position at a very young age, my mom and I would have, everybody talks about the talk that you have as a young African American, whether it's male or female, but the talk we had was based around education. My mom is like, you're having a lot of fun right now. We're in eighth grade, okay? You playing in the band, the orchestra, you're cheerleading, your basketball, your baseball, all these things. But we just got, I'll never forget, it was Wichita State. We just got something in the mail. And apparently, I'm hearing from coaches, you have an opportunity to get a scholarship. Right away, the mindset went into what do we need to do to get a scholarship? So throughout high school, I just focused literally on basketball, my education. And it wasn't until I signed to UConn my senior year, I ended up being able to run track and actually like exhale and have fun. But that was the mission. We had a goal as a family, my mom and I, and we were able to achieve it.
Yeah, was it always UConn, or who else were you considering beside them?
Yeah, so a little funny story. I had five schools because my mom was adamant that I was taking all five visits, and back then you can get up to five. I'm not sure how many it is right now. And so, Pat Summit actually was in pretty early, and Pat, I'll never forget, Pat came to speak at the banquet, and I still can't even believe how they got Pat Hit Summit to come speak at the banquet, but they did. And so it came down to, I was the only player out of our class that it came down to Tennessee and UConn. And I literally made the decision based off the fact that I wanted to be sure that my family could be able to watch my games. And at the time, we were in the Big East. You had West Virginia, Villanova, and I'm from outside of Pittsburgh. So that meant a lot to me. And I also knew I wanted to go into media, and ESPN was right there in the backyard. And so there was just a lot of synergy to happen at that time. My mom made me call and tell Pat that I was not coming.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
how did that conversation go?
yeah. So it went a little bit like this. I feel you're making the wrong decision, but I love you and your mother so much that every time I see you, you guys are good with me. And she stayed true to that. It did not matter if we were playing in Tennessee, at UConn, in the NCAA tournament. Pat would always find my mother. She would find me and make sure we got a hug. And she said nothing but kind words. And I respect that. I respected that from the start to the finish, even when it was, you know, we're trying to go for the 2000 championship, and they're like, "Oh, Pat and Gino in Philly, what steak you going with?" I'm like, "I'm just grab both." So, I definitely had an experience of that back in the day. UConn Tennessee rivalry was
I'm sure you had some basketball dreams, obviously winning the national championship, those kind of things. But did you ever see yourself transitioning into being an executive, in the NBA, or just an executive in basketball, period?
I didn't. Kind of a, it's really interesting. So I had been planning my retirement since the day I got drafted to Detroit.
Mm.
Like my mindset, I have had great mentors, great people in my life that always kind of kept me thinking about like, what's next? How are we preparing? And so when I was retiring with the New York Liberty, I had already had a contract set up to go into television. That was a done deal. And I'll never forget at my celebration after my retirement, after the game, there were so many people in town. Isaiah went to my mom and I looked over in the corner. I didn't think anything of it. Then my mom made her way over to me and she said, Isaiah came and talked to me. He said, like, your daughter's very bright. And, we need to try to figure out how to keep her in the WNBA and create a position or whatever for her, because like her mind about the business side, and she has these great ideas. She said, you should think about that. Like, I liked what he was talking about. And I know you, and I looked at my mom like, are you kidding? We've been planning everything out, and now you're throwing this curveball. Long story short, I ended up taking the television contract still, but Isaiah Thomas and the New York Liberty created the first position, which was the director of franchise development. And I was the first kind of player that went into that role, hybrid between the business and the basketball side. And I just was like, wow, okay, all these things and ideas I had, now I have a way to speak to this side in operations, but I also understand the different vertical on the business side and how business is going to kind of cross back and forth and how it has to float like that in order to have success.
Well, and the thing is, like, you, before you kind of transition into the NBA, like, you had a great job and position with the Liberty. So what was it that made you want to move over to the NBA?
It really came down to opportunity. And I'm glad you asked this question, Jemele, because when I made the decision to go to the NBA, a lot of people were, why are you doing that? You're here in the W. What they don't realize is you have to have opportunity to stay in the W. And so, I was working at the time with David Griffin down at TNT, and he said to me, hey, if I get one of these jobs, like, I'm going to reach out to you. And that was off the strength of us talking, having conversations in the green room about sports and all of that. When the Liberty got sold to Brooklyn, there was an opportunity for me to potentially come on board. Shout out to Kia Clark, the CEO, because she's over there killing it. But it was on the business side. And I said, for me at that point in time in my career, yeah, I could definitely go over to the business side. But I feel like I have not only shown, but have the skill set, knowledge, and ability to do what needs to be done on the operations side as well. So that opportunity at that point in time was not there for me. Understood, not a problem. And so I was able to take the NBA opportunity that was presented to me. And so it wasn't like I was seeking out the NBA. It was time, place, opportunity, and we took advantage of it.
So on that end, I mean, looking around the W now, how do you think the league has done in terms of welcoming, or at least making these kind of opportunities available to former players?
Yeah, I am not happy with where it is right now. I recently had a conversation with Lisa and talking about her experience and to become a head coach in the W, and it just really didn't sit well with me. And the biggest thing for me is that throughout my whole career, you're going to springboard to something new, but you always have to pay respect to the ones that also built the foundation and the ones that have the skill set, the knowledge, and the ability to do the jobs. I don't believe in this thing that former players come in and they're not ready. If you really want to be inclusive, as I believe the W has been forever and wants to be, then you have to open up those opportunities. Isaiah Thomas didn't go to my mom and say, Swin has ran this many, she went from manager, senior manager, here, and now she's ready for a director position. He went and said, I saw this in her. I want to give her the opportunity. That is all a lot of women are asking for. Give that opportunity and then watch them be able to grow. And also, don't just give the opportunity to say, yay, we did it. And then you have the shortest amount of leash for somebody that's been in this league, helping build this league, that's trying to grow. You don't put the resources around them. You don't give them the things that they need to have success, but then you're ready to cut bait and just go for the shiny object over here. I don't believe in that. And that's why, for me, I'm so invested in women in their careers in sports, because they have to understand how to surround themselves, not only with a good tribe, but the resources to prepare for any opportunity that may be ahead of them.
You mentioned something key and important about Lisa, as in Lisa Leslie's experience. She talked about how she was up for 2 jobs, didn't get them, and she pretty much said she was done interviewing in the W for a head coaching position. A pretty, I think, embarrassing statistic I stumbled upon for this particular season is that there's only one Black woman who's a head coach in the W right now. What is happening there from your perspective? Is this a matter of interest, opportunity? Like what is going on? Because a league that is 70% Black, it should seem like that should never be the case.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't have an answer for that, Jemele, but I am just as curious as you are. I would love to have more conversations. Obviously, a lot of the owners I've had relationships with and continue to have relationships with. And those questions I feel like need to be asked. Like, how are we going about our hiring process? And you don't want to ever get to a point where we're looking at a potential Rooney Rule in the WNBA. Like, that should never be even a thought at all. But maybe as times are changing, as pressure is coming in even more teams being added, more evaluations going up, people tend to sometimes go after what could possibly be like headline or safe bets and different things. But it's funny because the safe bets usually exclude women and minorities a lot of the time. And we just, I think as a league, and I say we because I care about the W so much, is that have to do a better job, and it has to be accountability. And so I think, from the top, from Kathy on down to the owners, there really needs to be more discussion around that.
Yeah. How concerned are you as somebody who, still very much is a member of that league? You played there, I think it'll always be part of your membership of being in the W. But how concerned are you as there's these new owners, new influx of cash, new opportunities, new eyeballs? Are you concerned that women will begin to be sort of pushed out of the thing that they built?
My hope is that when you're doing the background on bringing on these new owners, that there are certain criteria and stipulations that come with you getting a WNBA team. How are you going to go about your hiring process? How are you trying to be connected to the community? It's not just a money grab. This is a build. It's good business, but it also should be about all the things that are important to these women who are the product that go out there and play on the court. And so, speaking with a few of the new owners that are actually coming in, I've liked how some of them have been very aggressive. We could obviously, the Valkyries, you go to them right away, but I like how they have been aggressive, not only with how they're going to resource the team, but also start looking at some of those cap tables. Like, that tells you a lot too.
You spent 6 years with the Pelicans in the front office. When you began working with NBA players obviously you knew NBA players, but like working in the culture of the NBA on a day-to-day basis, what did you have to adapt to? What did you have to get used to that was different about how they do things in the NBA versus what you were used to?
Well, there was a lot more money from NBA.
Right.
And I say that, let me take a step back. I came from New York, so I will give a shout out to MSG because we did have the resources we needed. Now, towards the end, with the transition happening, it is what it is. But I would see just from team to team, not just, our team, but everything's different. How much money you're getting on the road for food, how many resources are offered to you. So those things were immediately like, okay. But the biggest glaring thing is that the players and I were fine. There's not a player that came through here that you couldn't have a conversation with, and they probably would tell you like Swin and I were good because I came in very authentic of I'm coming in from an athlete position because I've been where you're at right now, and I've also been where you're trying to get to. That's one. And then two, being very transparent and leading with truth makes it easier for somebody, whether you curse me out for that day and be mad about everything, you're going to come back, you're going to get this little hug, this little jab, we're going to be good and we're going to keep it moving. It's like, teammates. And so I approached it from that standpoint, and that was always fine. I think what I had to learn quickly was that when you come into a space and sometimes former athletes and you may have a resume like I did, you tend to think because you're a teammate, you're just like, oh, okay, everybody's cool, we're going to get together. But what you fail to realize, and what I had to adapt to really quickly, is some people this has been their only career. They've only been in the NBA and they've been scratching and clawing to get ahead. And I'm coming in from a vice president standpoint being like, okay, well, here's how I kind of see it. And people look at you, and not only you're a woman, you're a Black woman, but also, why do you have that title that I'm trying to get to? And so instead of taking the approach of let me just, come in and lay the hammer down, I started taking people out individually, like letting people get to know me. And it's weird because a lot of times you think people are going to give you the benefit of the doubt, but forming relationships was the biggest thing that I learned in year one that I had to do and move quickly on.
I think a lot of people, of course, they see more women, especially more former WNBA players, frankly, being in these front office positions, even getting experience as coaches. They assume that you're in an environment where potentially men won't respect you as much just because of what your background is or just being a Black woman. So what would you say, or how would you describe your experience in terms of what that dynamic was like? Here you are, a woman who's a former WNBA player who's got all the things on her resume. Did you find yourself, was it at all difficult to get the players' respect, or is that part of it overblown?
It's very overblown. And I want to say this on your show because people need to stop using tools to keep them in positions. And that's across the NBA or anywhere else. There is not a problem where if you're telling me that a woman coming into a male space means that, oh my goodness, he's going to rage out, something's going to happen, it's the boys club. The problem with that is that then you should be having more resources to help the guy that's in that situation than worried about the female. Because I believe this is the day that we even hired Teresa Witherspoon, is that hiring women is good business because diversity of thought in your room is important. Like, we're not living in a society where it's just the men are over here making all the decisions. Now, well, let's leave government out of it. But we're not in a society right now where men are just over here making all the decisions and everything. Like, we have to be honest about the environments we're creating for these young men with skill sets that are just trying to get better. An athlete does not care if it's coming from a male or a female. Can you help me get better? Can you help me get to the bag? Can you help me build my brand? Like, these are real questions. And what I find a lot is that people tend to create and keep saying these different stereotypes in order to keep people out.
It seemed like that seemed to be a major kind of roadblock that people have in saying that, like, oh, the reason why we won't see women coaching or women in these roles is because a man will never, that's an NBA player, will never accept her opinion. And it sounds like you had the opposite experience. As you said, like, most of the guys just want to get better. So to that end, as you know, when you were with the Pelicans, and again, to repeat, you were there 6 years, there was a lot written and said about Zion Williamson. At least from what I read and what I understand, like you and him had a pretty good relationship. So putting aside his injury issues, where do you see Zion has to go in order to get better? Just become a next level player. Like, when he's out there and he's healthy, he's a dynamic player. But what do you see as maybe some of the things that he needs to do in order to become that complete NBA player that he's always wanted to be?
I would say in regards to Zion, and I say this for any player coming in, right? Sometimes it's like, people that come in, it may take others a little bit longer than others, right? And it's understanding the NBA, what you need for yourself, what you need for your body, for your mind, how to be better at watching film, all those different things, right? And so I think Zion right now has what he needs. I think he's seen enough of the years that it's really going to take what's kind of in his mind. And is this the time that I'm ready to kind of take the step? I do believe being in situations, um, being on certain teams, the way the team's makeup is, can also affect the player's career, one way or another. But I would say for Z, the next step is like, is he ready to take it? Does he have the skill set? I've never seen a player play like him ever at that size, that amount of thrust. Never seen it. So I think this next upcoming year and the year after that, if he's ready to take it to the next level with consistency, you'll be able to see it. Zion healthy on the court, playing, even if it was 70 games, is maximum impact.
So how did you feel about how the media has covered and portrayed Zion?
Yeah, so it bothered me a lot at different times, and I think it bothered me more because I saw the way that it became a tool for clickbait more than it was a critique of the player. Like, I knew some of the people on air that would be screaming or going in on him, and it'd be the same people that we would reach out to and be like, "Yo, do you want to have a conversation? We're coming in town behind closed doors." But that wasn't really, everything wanted to be public instead of behind closed doors. Now, granted, and Zion knows this, and he's talked about it as well. He has to own some of the things that also came out, or some of the ways that he has been, and so I think he did that. But for me, internally, being able to watch a player's growth, part of my job is to speak truth to your situation, and then try to provide any resources or opportunities with your team that's around you in order to help you be better. And so, I didn't like that part, but I will say this, Jemele, I think opportunities like that, it either makes a player stronger, or it's going to affect you in a way where you won't be able to get over it. And I do believe that Zion has the ability to come out and play, stay healthy, stay on the court, and just prove people wrong. And that's the type of approach that I would take as a player, is just come out and be consistent, and then all that goes away. But it's unfortunate that so much would have to be brought on somebody at the time that was 20 years old, and it can be frustrating. But when you're in a position that I was in, it's really about, okay, how do we as a team, how do we, as like with his agency, with his family, figure out what's the best step forward instead of looking backwards?
So from what you could see, how much was he sort of impacted psychologically by how the media often portrayed him?
Yeah, I can't speak for, where he was from a psychological standpoint. I think that's, his story to tell whenever he feels he wants to kind of talk about it. I would just say, for me, from a psychological standpoint, it was tough because I know how difficult it already is to be young, Black, successful within kind of not only the country, but in the world, right? And when you open up, when it's other people that look like you that are opening up these critiques that are not about your game, but everything else around it, when pictures are getting shown and all those things, that can be tough. So for me, it was hard because I'm in protection mode. Like, I care about these guys. I'm with them day and day in the thick of it. I had one time somebody call me and be like, "Oh, well, what's going on down there? So-and-so is looking like this and looking like that." One thing you will always know about me, and no one will ever be able to say, is you will not hear somebody say, "Well, Swin said X, Y, and Z." 6 years. Have you heard my name or seen my name in the media? Has it come up with any of these breaking news reporters? We don't move like that. Never moved like that. You can't be in a foxhole with somebody and also at the same time giving out information and trying to throw people under the bus. If I'm not doing my job, look, we take jobs in sports, especially front office, understanding that we're probably going to get fired or removed in X amount of years, right? You get 2 runs at it, cool. But you have to understand how the cycle works. And whenever I was told about kind of leaving the job here in New Orleans, I'll never forget this, Jemele. I had somebody in another front office call me, said, if you ever need anything, all I want to do is call and tell you I respect the hell out of you, because you never heard. A lot of people knew different things that were happening. We never heard your name, not even on the trail scouting, wherever the Swin said X, Y, and Z. And I said, and you never will. Because that's how we move. And unfortunately, women, we know how to move really well like that, don't we, Jemele?
We do. We often are not given enough credit for how we are able to do that. But as I have often said before with certain people, I was like, they needed to take my silence as a gift. So please do that. Absolutely. Swin, you had mentioned earlier in this podcast, you talked about just sort of the dynamics that you face in a professional setting and these executive settings as a woman. And you have created this wonderful platform, She's Got Time, which is kind of a blend of not just storytelling, but also a summit that you're having in Vegas, like really being able to put women in contact with one another across the sports industry and also to empower them. So give me the reason why you felt like it was important for you to develop this kind of platform that helped women who are pursuing and within careers in sports.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I love She's Got Time. It's been near and dear to my heart. So in 2022, when I was going into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, I took a couple of months to really kind of writing out the speech. And thank you for your participation and help with that as well. Just making that a special day for myself. But I was thinking about how I could be more intentional. I felt like one door was closing. And a lot of times, and I'm not sure you get this, you get hundreds of women being like, hey, can you be a mentor? Young people, hey, I need this, I need that. And I realized, like, having children, also having a career, like, your time is very limited. And so I felt like I wanted to create this ecosystem that could really bring women together in an authentic way, an intentional way, to have access. Like, we want to help women scale their careers in sports. And the only way to do that is to put you in a room with people in close proximity that maybe deals can be done, opportunities can be met. And I didn't see that happening with a lot of women that looked like me. And so when we went back to the drawing board, I went to my husband and I said, look, I have this idea and this concept God has really put on my heart. And I want to be intentional about how we are including women, how we're servicing women, how we're building community. Can you help me? He looked at me and he said, you must be serious, because you don't ask me for anything. And so I said, I'm absolutely serious. So we went about the hiring process and we hired people, and I knew I was an executive at the time. And we put people in position to build this company. So we are a media and lifestyle company. Yes, we focus on storytelling. We have our media arm, and we're continuing to grow that. We have our IRLs, like our summit that's going to be in Vegas. This will be our first year in Vegas. We were intentional. The last 2 years we had it in New Orleans, but we wanted to bring it over NBA Summer League to Vegas, knowing that we had all 30 teams in Vegas. Shout out to NFL, NWSL, all the other people that actually raised their hand and said, hey, we're going to show up as well. And then also the third piece of that is just really our community and our app. We have an app. You can go to She's Got Time and download it and join that community. And so this isn't about, it's less about me and more about us. And I've had great mentors. You've had some great mentors too, Jemele, but there are a lot of women out there navigating, whether you're an OG like Amy Trask at the C-suite level, or you're an entry level, you're an influencer, you're behind the camera, you're coming in to media and you want to have that tribe or that sisterhood. We're trying to create that for you.
It's interesting to me that during this time, as you're doing She's Got Time, you know, noting that like the number of NBA teams and the number of what would be traditionally, you know, male environments, the NBA, the NFL, these other sports are hiring more women, and especially former athletes to come in to their system and, you know, obviously, you know, sort of grace it with their own, you know, intelligence and background and everything experience that they have. So why do you think in particular in the NBA that hiring former WNBA players for positions like the one you had. And again, you weren't the only one. Why do you think that's become more attractive to some teams?
First, I think society kind of had a wake up call for us. I think through kind of what happened with George Floyd, I think people said, wait a minute, we've been doing the same things. How can we be different? So that was an opportunity. I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at it as, okay, every time you're doing a kind of gut check and evaluation of yourself, how can we be better? So when the opportunity presented itself for women like me, it's good business. Like, I am so sick of hearing people talk about, oh, we want to support women. We want to get this woman in here. It ain't charity. Do you know how many sharp women there are that could run circles around some of the people that I know in this industry? Like, that's the part that really is just mind boggling to me, is that you should want to have good business. And good business means diversity of thought in your room. If I'm an owner, if I'm a team president, I said this to David Griffin, who was my boss for 6 years. I said, you get paid to make the decision. I get paid to evaluate, to see how we can scale, how we can be better, but more resources. I'm going to give you everything that I think you should know. Once you make the decision, we move. And that's just how I operate. Because one day when I sit in that chair, I'm hoping the people around me, and the executive team or the leadership that I built, they're diverse enough to give me that feedback. And you can't tell me that if there's all men that is in the room and there's not a woman, that you couldn't have gotten a different thought or maybe a better way to think about something. So as an entrepreneur, I look at it and say the same thing I do as an entrepreneur is the same thing I want to do in an MBA office, a WNBA office. I want diversity of thought because it's good business.
Speaking of good business, I mean, clearly it's become really good business in the WNBA, and that could not be illustrated better by expansion. And naturally, I have to ask you about how you feel about the fact that Detroit is getting its WNBA team back. It's a team that you won championships with, the Detroit Shock, which became the Dallas Wings, but that's a story for another day. But nevertheless, Swin, us Detroiters, we love you because of what you built in Detroit, and now seeing the city get the team back. How did that make you feel, seeing that Detroit will have a team again, I believe, in 2029?
Yeah, it warmed my heart. It really did. Because I'm gonna tell you, Jemele, I would come through Detroit, whether I was traveling through from the airport, traveling with the team, going back to play the Pistons. There's not one person that wouldn't pull up on me like, "What's up? When we getting our team back? What you doing? How are you involved?" And I'm like, I'm working it. They're like, no. How we get our team back? And so it was really just for me, heartwarming. Shout out to Arn Tellum, Tom Gores, that everyone. If you haven't looked, when I said earlier in the podcast to look at people's cap table, that'll tell you the direction you're trying to go in. And I think what they formed there in Detroit is people who actually care not only about the business of the W, but like how this is going to blossom into even more. And so, yes, I am excited for the whole city. Everybody in my DMs yelling, "What up, though?" I get it. I'm happy for the city. It's gonna be popping again. And so, yeah, it really is a true feat for the city of Detroit to have their team back.
Now, a lot of people don't know that Detroit won 3 titles in, I believe, 6 years. Still believe that the Shock are the only professional sports team to go from last place to winning a title the very next year. Something you never see, obviously, in major professional sports. How do you feel as if the Shock were remembered? Like, I said this, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think the Shock have the most disrespected WNBA legacy of all the dynasties that have happened in the WNBA. Like, when they're talking about the WNBA dynasties, of course, they bring up the Sparks, they bring up the Lynx, they bring up the Comets. You do not hear the Shock. So, I mean, am I just in my feelings because I'm a Detroiter? How do you think the Shock's legacy has been remembered in sort of the WNBA atmosphere?
No, you are not in your feelings. You are absolutely right. And I would say this before the team even came back. It was very short-sighted from a standpoint that because the team moved, it was easier to just kind of not talk about them. But to be honest with you, when we were winning, it was kind of the dismissive, oh, well, they play too rough, they do this. It was always something, but those banners still went up. And that's what I really don't even understand is like, if that's going to be the case, then shout out to Detroit. It's about time to tell your own story, because obviously we have some young people that may not use Google as much. They need to start doing that, because there's teams from the Houston Comets all the way up that have won. There's been dynasties, and you have to put Detroit in that. But I think when you don't see it as much, it's easy to fade to the background. So that's why I say, like, maybe it's time to start telling those stories, because that, I'm telling you, to play in front of almost 22,000 in the Palace, to come back from LA after getting our faces smacked. And I tell Lisa, I mess with Lisa all the time. They came back up in there smooth, like, oh, we about to get number 3 and have our dynasty. What's up? And I listen, I'm not even gonna get into it, but your girl, we didn't sleep. I was in an exit row from LA to Detroit. Didn't sleep, was pacing. We had to win 2 games in Detroit, and Detroit pulled up, and we were able to win. So, like, it's the storytelling around it, and I really hope, as She's Got Time continues to build, that we're in position to continue to tell those stories as well.
Yeah, I had Candace Parker as a guest on Spolitics a few weeks ago, and naturally I asked her about the fight between the Shock and the Sparks, where Candace was a rookie, and Candace almost got lumped up. Good old Planette Pearson and everybody.
Listen,
That was something.
It's so much that's there, from the identity to how it was built to, like, it. I will say this: the team coming back to Detroit. There's some people that still in the radio station. Shout out to Bushman and everybody else. When I tell you the culture of Detroit, when the Shock were there and I got drafted there, and we were like, we're turning this thing around. Everybody pulled up. I mean, everybody from courtside to our games. We would go out in the community. It was Pistons, Shock, Lions, everybody, whether we in the same club, whether we in the same restaurants, like, it was that type of family dynamic that really brought the sports town where it was at that point in time. And so I really hope that those days can kind of come on back. And it was popping even some this year. You know that, being at the Pistons game in downtown now. So that's a little different dynamic.
Yeah, I think that's what's actually going to be even more encouraging, is like they'll get to play downtown, and Detroit has always been a great sports city, despite what Sophie Cunningham may think. Is that, the Shock the Shock, I mean, they were in the top 5 in attendance, set a record for like most attended finals game. I mean, like a lot of attendance record because of how the city supported. All right, Swin, to wrap this up, wrap up every podcast with what I call a messy question. This is the question where we make the blogs. This is where we get all the clickbait headlines. This is where it happens. All right. What will we see first? This is the messy question. What will we see first? A woman being a head coach of an NBA team, or a WNBA player making $1 million a season?
It's a messy question. But I'm giving an honest answer. I think we will. I think we will see. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of work to do from the coaching standpoint in the NBA. Shout out to Jenny Busick that has been kind of making her way in the ranks. We'll see a WNBA player make $1 million.
Actually, I'm really surprised you said that. I thought you'd say the other direction, and only because, like, you look at, obviously Becky Hammon was in the league. You look at the Indiana Pacers. I mean, their defense was designed basically by a woman coach, and it feels like, especially, I guess, if you're hearing the what has been the conversation around this CBA that is about to be negotiated between the players, the WNBA players, and the league. I know it won't. I'm not hopeful it will happen this CBA, so it may take another 4, 5, 6 years for things to happen. I was like, I could see, especially if you got the Knicks, who already said they talked to Dawn Staley, I could see that happening before you actually had a WNBA player making $1 million in a season.
So let me say this to you. When you go through the hiring process and being intricately involved in that on the NBA side, I said this from my standpoint of, as I was continuing to grow and wanting to eventually become president of basketball operations or the top spot, is that it's going to take one owner that is not worried about, can a woman lead? How are the men going to feel? What's the locker room situation going to be? What's this going to be? Because I think at the belly part of the NBA, there's a lot of people that continue those conversations going, that it starts feeding upwards and starts feeding downwards. And so you'll hear women's name in conversation for jobs, but are their name just in it, or have they really been considered? That is where we have to get to, is like the consideration of, let me not do this for the headlines, but let me do this because this is actually what I think we really need for our organization. I think that you are the one. And I think it's going to take one owner to be able to do that. As many of these NBA teams that are getting bought right now, I do think that there are more ownership groups that are coming in that may have an appetite for that. But I do feel there's a lot of work still to be done.